Hi, everyone. This is Aram Melkoumov, and you're listening to the Product Innovation Show. I'm here with Avadhoot Bhambare, Director of Product at Womply. He spent 3 years as a lead product manager working at PayPal before this, where he was managing a team of 50 people, a mix of product managers, designers, and developers. Thank you so much for coming on our show today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hey, great. Thank you. Thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm so happy and excited to talk with all of you.
Awesome. Great. So when we had a chance to connect previously, you shared an interesting story, and I love it if you could talk about it with our audience today. So it was a story about pricing, I think, a hard drive,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Prior to in my earlier career, I was at Seagate doing pricing product management there. Seagate is a hard drive company, as we all know, but it's a commoditized product, right? There are lead players are very low, but it's a hardware product. So literally, people are playing there on the margin, which yes, there are always some engineering values and some unique offering for each product, but it's a SKU-based pricing. So essentially, a hard drive that Seagate is offering in all the technicalities, it is not going to be different than what its competitors are offering, right? So the margins are very thin. So I remember there were and the pricing discussions used to happen every quarter. They used to revisit with the customers and all. So I remember there was this one, so to say, hard customer that was always kind of thrifty in terms of making the deals, and literally we used to negotiate based on like just 1 cent, 2 cent per SKU. Of course, in a P&L that would blow out to a good number and margins would be different. But no, I'm not going to give you 29.93. I want 29.92. And it was so what we used to say, this is like a fish market where we
Yeah,
are just literally fighting with each other on cents and pennies.
that's crazy. Yeah, pricing is always a difficult thing. And were you doing that with like the product marketing team, or was it just pure like from a pricing?
No,
Um,
purely from the pricing team. Product marketing was more of a stakeholder, but they would come
okay,
into picture into when it is new launch, go to marketing, etc., etc. But usual existing product pricing, quarterly reviews, those would be more of a functional.
okay, cool. Um, so interesting story. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I've always been curious. How do you price a hard drive, especially back then? So my next question I have is, you've been working at companies like PayPal and now at Womply, and you have a few years of experience now managing teams. What have you found during this time um, help really synergize them?
Yeah,
Between UX designers, software engineers, and product
yeah,
managers.
yeah, great. My It's funny that you asked this. My leadership experience or management experience also has evolved with time. As I started my career with a startup, there was very less back in this 2 decades ago. There was very less, and of course, I was a recent graduate, so I was more into a contributing role rather than that of a leading role. But I went to a management consultancy firm, and that's where I started leading. And the dynamics were there totally different. I was leading big teams, 50, 60, 70 people in different capacities. Then when I was in US, again in the same management role, the teams here were much more agile and much more shorter. But of course, the dynamics of people management were typically different than that of the consultancy world. It was focused. There were so many great people that you would have in a concentrated skill set. So as opposed to managing a team of generalists, now you're talking to a few people in your team as their leader, but they're totally expert, and many times they are expert than you. So when it comes to the matter of synergizing between them, I always keep in mind that whatever are the different challenges in terms of communication, in terms of skills, in terms of background, one thing as a leader I have to make sure that everybody in my team is having a sense of camaraderie. They are aligned with the vision or vision or the purpose that we are trying to do for the format. It can be short vision, like specific to, okay, in this scrum we want to achieve this, or it can be, okay, as a company, as a product, we want to go there. So that vision and that sense of ownership is always should be there, and you should have those synergy between your teams should be oscillating with each other rather than reverberating and all.
Hmm. And so when when you joined Womply as the director of product, what were some like the first things that you did in order to align the teams? So you mentioned vision. What about like skill set analysis or product road mapping? How did you kind of like get into this role
Yeah,
with your
yeah,
team?
uh, yeah. Womply role was a great opportunity. The supervisor here, he knew me through social circles, and he was like, "I'm building a set of payment product here, so why don't you come and join the ship?" So I was, yes, very much excited, and when I went there, it was building from grounds up. We had some limited core offerings as a platform, but payment products were new. So uh, uh, as I do in my every new opportunity, whether it is within the companies or when I change jobs, like maybe 60, 90, and 90 plus days roadmap. I try to understand more about the product in first 30, 60 days. Then in next 90 days, I want to try and understand more about the PIM company as a whole, the other adjacent offerings. And once I'm comfortable there, I get into the understanding of how the customers work here. I mean, how the customers are impacted, how the company work towards that. So typical ABCs, achieving the understanding of the customers, then building some synergies. So I try to first build or contribute to some small features, and then some next 90 days would be build some product or some major feature, and then lastly start building processes so that the impact is much more higher. Uh, in terms of aligning the skill sets and building the ship together, uh, we were hiring pretty crazy at that time, and just then pandemic started happening, so we were like on a directionless board for a couple of weeks, I would say. But my leadership was pretty strong, and they quickly realigned as to what are the next things that we want to do. Incidentally, I was also helping my team to start our global development center back in India. So that was another challenge, that you cannot travel there, you cannot meet people
Mm.
there, but we had some key resources who were helping us towards that. So finding the right fit was always a challenge. We relied heavily on references, and then we had some planned assessments that we would be looking for in our next captains or leaders or engineers.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Um, and if I'm not mistaken, with Womply, you're in the B2B space, right?
Yeah,
So as a B2B company, I'd love to kind of get your perspective on how do you how do you differentiate your product offering when there's so many other like B2B applications that are available in the market? Um,
yeah.
how do you do that at Womply, or how do you do that in general?
Yeah, yeah. Most of my career I have been into B2B, but Womply is a unique case. It's a SMB platform. So Aram's Cafe, who is around the corner, they are our typical customers. In this case, it is B2B, but it has a flavor of B2C as well, because the customer here is kind of a consumer customer, but incidentally, it's an application or a platform for businesses. So and this is a really complex one, because even at PayPal or prior to PayPal and my Seagate or other Citibank, all those consultancy experiences, there is always your competition that would be giving similar offering and all. I think what differentiates is the way you treat your customers in, because the uh, again, quoting from a hard drive example, it is going to be a hard drive. It is going to have same capacity if you compare the technicalities, but the kind of experience that you give to your customers in terms of everything, right from onboarding them, make them use your product, and while using the product, how do you support them, and post usage of product, maybe in terms of billing, some queries, some customer success issue. So that is a differentiating factor where I can always try to make something unique or make sure that I get that delighted feedback or experience from the customer.
Okay. Um, and at Womply, you know, you guys went and created your own infrastructure, right? In order to service the client base, but not everybody always has that privilege or the capital to go and
Yeah.
create this foundation for them. Um, what you know, what can or should you do differently as a product leader when you don't have access to that type of a capital?
Uh, yeah, it's funny you ask Aram these things now because things and technology has changed so much. Again, coming back to my point of customer services, even the giants like Amazon, they have made it so easy for people to access and utilize their framework. So yes, when you are scaled up, then you have some funds, you have some the budget issues are taken care of, and you can play around it. But I always talk with my friends who are founders, who are in seed stage and something. So one of the pain points where they say that, hey, when I started the idea, then AWS was offering it as free, and then when I reached certain usage, then they would start billing me. So until I came to that point, I was kind of okay. I was being taken care of, but now I am at a usage where they'll start offering me or charging me, and I still don't have funds. So it's a tricky problem. And I always look at any problem by solving it if structurally. So I took a two or three I take two or three four fanged approaches, I would say. One, I would try to be thrifty when I don't have budget. I will try to see, can I modularize me, and each model can be acted as separately, etc., etc. So I'll try to be as thrifty as possible. I would have limited releases, I would have limited functionalities. I would try focus more on MVPs than on the skill. Second approach I would take, okay, if that is not going to work out, then I would have to try to do some barter. Like, okay, I need my heavy infrastructure right now. So what is it that I can probably compromise? Probably I have to work some extra hours with my teams and compensate in terms of resources by hiring less people or something. But it is
Hmm.
going to be just that phase of the company where you need to have the all hands on. So I'll try to do the bartering. And third one is, obviously I'll focus on solving the key issue, which is related, if it is related to budget and all those things. So and of course, in general, apart from this structured approach, I always see that there are people who are willing to help you in terms of, might be some startups who might be giving you some trial version which may not be as rich in features compared to Amazon's and Google's offering, but they might help you. So you should always keep an eye on such offerings, such of partnerships, of symbiosis or synergies that you can build around.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's also a ton of different kind of startup programs or startup credits that are available,
Yeah, yeah,
like AWS for one. So there's always options, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Great. Okay. Next question I have is really about product development. So, um, you mentioned being thrifty and trying to use like certain tactics when you're in a in the situation, but specifically with product management, what are the steps in a journey of building a product that often see being skipped? Um, and what are the results, do you think, of those things being passed over on?
Um, uh, Product management as a art or science, if you look at it both ways, I think it has certain structure, and this the field of product management is pretty mature now. People are, if not anything, people are doing every day some innovations. So if I look into that structure, it's hard to skip those structure, but there are some minute steps within structure people tend to forget. So one example is when I look at building a new product or in a new offering, I always start with, as anyone other, I always like think about customer problem. Customer problems are such that you should have to build your solutions addressing three key needs of customer, and those can be categorized. It can be an emotional, hey, I will feel better if you change the product or solve it. It can be as simple as give me button, give me some feature, etc., etc. It can be a cognitive need, which is like, hey, I know I'm, especially in the B2B space, that happens. Your users of your product are well equipped or well trained users. It's not like a consumer product where any Sam Harry can use it. Here it is someone who knows the trade, who knows the details about the product, or they have some technical engineering or business background there. So they are cognitive. So I want to understand my, I want you to help me understand it better by doing X and Y and Z. That's another need. And third one is more of a functional. It is specifically use case, like, okay, I am operating in this way, how do you solve this? So thinking from the customer's problem, thinking for the customer's problem from these particular angles is is a skill that you acquire over time. You cannot get it in some course or something. So you have to be always brainstorming yourself, see what you did and learn from it. That is one thing. Second thing that people probably they don't do it on purpose but miss, as you said, is giving customer a full control and transparency of the users. For example, we are in fintech space, right? So everybody knows that a credit card offering will have something called as APR and all, and everybody advertises their products as, hey, this card is going to be free for you, no monthly or no yearly fee, etc. APR is going to be zero for promotional period, etc., etc. And that's it. People stop at that point.
Hmm.
But you have to make sure that yes, there are other parts of fees. For example, there can be, when the promotion expires, what are the fees, what is the APR. There can be other parts like, in case of some fraud or disputes or chargebacks in the specific B2B space, what would be the penalties, what will be the some of the fees that you will have, if there are any scheduled payments that are going to happen, if you miss them, what are those? So basically remove the middleman and the expensive fees. Those are another few taxes, giving them the full transparency right from day one. There are
Hmm.
few more, but probably to begin with we can we can stop at this.
Okay, okay. And um, the PMs that you have on your team, or even previously in your last role, what did you see that they were doing wrong, or even with your current team now, that they need to start doing differently, like right away?
uh, uh, I won't say that they are doing it wrong because that's kind of a strong way to say that. But probably I would say uh, there are some things that even I sometimes in the flow of the work miss. One of that is I have seen good PMs bringing the user feedback very late. They probably start with like, okay, I want to solve this problem and I want to build it. And personally, I am more of a man of, as they say, man of action. With a hacker mentality, I start like, okay, let me build it. Okay, if it is not possible on production, I'll work with my DevOps to get a pseudo environment set up and start building something, a scrappy screen, no buttons, etc., etc., etc. Everything assumed and something. But when I'm doing this, knowingly or unknowingly, the engineer in me, he creeps up and he thinks about solving the problem technically, performance, scale, use cases, corner edge cases. Whereas the user need can be as simple as, hey, you know what? I'm finding it very hard to locate a file on my desktop and upload it here. Why don't you integrate it automatically? Something like that.
Right.
So those are bringing the user feedback into development process right from the beginning or very early is a key thing.
And so it's a great point. And so just a question for you then on that: how do you go about doing? Uh, I'm sorry. How do you go about getting user feedback earlier on in the process? Is it you go through a clickable prototype on Figma? How do you capture things before investing time and money into building out and spending a lot of like
Yeah.
engineering time?
Yeah. Again, my heavy emphasis would be doing a good product research, a good market research, and I think that would fall mostly into your arena as a product manager, because that's where product managers are for. Sometimes you have to work with your marketers or market researchers. Like at big companies, you have those dedicated resources who are well equipped, access to resources, paid resources, etc. But typically in startups, that's not always the case. So you have to rely on talking to your network, talking to people who you think might be. So in my experience at my current job, there have been incidences where I didn't have anyone in the company. I didn't have anyone in my first level of networking. So I worked with my CEO to give me some references from his from his network that I can talk with. Incidentally, my CPO, he once gave me point of contact of one person who had once interviewed with Womply, but for whatever reason he didn't join. But he was still in touch with our
Hmm.
CPO, so that was a good one. Like, and that person was gracious to help something.
Okay. Okay, great. Before we jump into the fireside questions, which
Hmm.
we'll get to in a second, last question. I want you to tell us about your experience, if I'm not mistaken, that you had with Olympus, the photography company.
Yeah.
And why was it so hard?
Yeah. So Olympus was the photography company is how we know them, but they had an industrial microscope division. So it was the image processing software we were developing with them. Uh, mm, the hardest part in that entire experience was it was geography and cultural difference. It was a Japanese client, and within Olympus as a camera company, it is globally well known. But this division of industrial microscope was specifically working in a not even in the main cities of Tokyo. It was in some suburb around Tokyo. So the hardest part there was I had very less English speaking people working with me there, and
Hmm.
I had some people who were bilingual in my team. I personally was not, and majority of my team was not. So speaking with them with the language barriers was problem. This is something we were talking around 2007-8 time frame. So there was
Okay.
technology was not advanced. We didn't have smartphone. We didn't have translation app. Even Google didn't have that translate page back then, or it was not that mature that it might have helped us that translate the Japanese script into English and all those vice versa. Or even the screen sharing or recording was not possible, so I could share the screen and show them. So everything was written on plain documents or
Mm.
emails. So there were very funny incidences that I remember. Once I was showing something on screen, like in person, to a Japanese customer of ours, and I was showing them, and I was doing as basic as I could, like with maximum gestures, click here, talk this, take this, those kind of. And for some reason, the Japanese counterpart that or the bilingual person in my team, he had to step out, and it so happened that the Japanese customer asked me literally 4 times, show me it again, show me it again, show me it again. I was not sure what's going on. I had an engineer who was obviously young, and that's why very much action oriented. He was
Uh,
he whispered in my ear like, if he asks me one more time, I'm going to I'm going to run away from here, something like that. And then the our translator came in, and he explained what he wanted. So what we were doing, we were showing him OpenCV based algorithm which he knew of, because OpenCV is pretty mature algorithm. He said
yeah.
he was trying to show ask us like, show me something that you are doing on your own. But all he knew was like, show me, show me, show me, and he couldn't put his thoughts in English.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, communication and with different cultures and languages is just such a
Yeah,
hard thing to overcome. All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Cool. Thanks for sharing the story. All right. Fireside questions. So the format is try to answer it in like a minute or less. All right. So the first question I have is, what should product managers start doing tomorrow to ship better product?
Understand more about their users, involve the all the stakeholders, like specifically the designers who people bring in, along with your core engineers, and always think about what can go wrong
Okay, I always think
and
of what can
prepare
go
for
wrong.
that.
All right, good. I like that. What about next question is what aspects of product development money can't fix?
Oh, this is going to be an emotional one. I would say the sense of camaraderie, or the the ownership or the loyalty between the team, is something that you cannot get on any budget.
The loyalty within the team.
Within the team, towards the
Okay.
product, towards people, anything. But
Okay.
a general, like, they should have an affinity, a positive oscillation, that yes, I want to do this with this set of people.
Okay. Okay. Good. All right. Um, this is always like an interesting one. I get different types of points of view on, but at what point, if any, do you ask your users what they want you to build, and when not to do that?
When not to do that is tricky. I would say have as much as multiple touch points to talk to your users, pre, post, during. Uh, when not to do that is, I've I would have find it very hard earlier in my career, because everything you do is for some customers or some users. But over time, I have realized that there are use cases, there are special use cases, especially in the area of AI and machine learning, where the touch point of product is very less, or touch point of people is very less, and the automation is taking place. At that point, probably you do not want to confuse your users by giving them too much details and taking their feedback into doing something which is happening more at the framework level or at the base level of your product, as opposed to a layer that is closer to the customer.
Okay. Excellent. Um, this one's interesting. At what point can you throw money at a product problem?
But it depends, like, who is throwing the money. Like, if I'm the CEO, then I would throw as late as possible. But if I am on the engineering side, on the product side, I would need it right on day one. But I would say that, um, after you have your MVP successfully working end to end, then it's a matter of, like, okay, now I want to build this systematically in a scaled up version, and that's the time you should ask for funding.
Hmm. Okay. Perfect. Um, what do you believe that other people think is insane?
I can do it. That is my attitude on any difficult task. Like, I remember there was one hard project that we had, and I was working with someone in the team, and I, being a product manager, I'm not that deep into the intricacies of engineering language or something. And similar was the other product manager that I was working with. And he and I were struggling. There was some deep issue in the code base, which had a mix of Python, jQuery, and all. So, and it was like a fire situation, I would say. We were like at 11 o'clock in the night, we both were on call. And I was like, let's do it. Let's do it. We have to do it. So he said, even you don't know these skills. I don't know. How can we do it? I said, we don't have any option. We can't wait for an engineer to come in the morning. Let's deep dive into it. And so he appreciated that. I understand your enthusiasm towards it, but probably at this point we are really limited. So I think my attitude is always like, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. Don't worry, I'll do it. And sometimes it is like putting your own foot in your mouth. You think about, okay, now how I do it.
Yeah, that's always a hard one when when you commit and
Yeah,
you gotta your word is your bond. You gotta follow through on it, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, last question. What would be your advice to yourself, to your 30-year-old self, knowing everything you know now?
Mm. Even professionally, right?
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I would say, build relationships within your company or your corporate ecosystem is very important. Back in the when I look at younger myself, I was more zealous in terms of, hey, I want to do something great. I want to focus on this. I don't want any distraction and all. Whereas over time, I have realized that. and typically in a corporate career, you have to work with a lot of people. So the more friends, more acquaintances you have in different parts of the ecosystem, it helps you to accelerate your work. So I would focus on that.
Building relationships. Okay, perfect. Okay, that was my last question. Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed having you on our show. And always thank you to our listeners for supporting the show and tuning in all the time. Abarut,
Likewise.
it was a pleasure.